Bill Russell, the greatest winner of all time, a champion on and off the court, has died. This is just an immeasurable, incomprehensible loss, not for just basketball, but for humanity, for everyone as a whole. There's a lot to talk about with Bill Russell, and his legacy is long. It is decorated. It spans multiple decades. It's on and off the court. No amount of words, nothing I can say properly captures who Bill Russell was. Nothing can properly do justice to his legacy. But I'm going to try. I will say that anybody who's ever played basketball at whatever level owes Bill Russell as one of the greats, one of the pioneers, the legends, the early architects of the game. We owe him a debt of gratitude. I certainly do. When someone is so dominant, so amazingly good at everything that he did, we all owe him a thank you. Bill Russell was born in Louisiana, Deep South, at a time where the hate was as strong as ever. He experienced incomprehensible things. And he channeled all of that into winning. He won state championships. He went to college and won college championships. He went to the Olympics, won a gold medal as the captain of the team. He almost went to the Harlem Globetrotters. He almost skipped the NBA. When it was 1956, and in 1956, the league was integrated, but the biggest stars, some of the best basketball players, were actually playing for the Harlem Globetrotters. And for people who don't know the history of the Harlem Globetrotters, that used to be a legitimate basketball team that was barnstorming. There was a barnstorming era where teams would just travel the country. The New York Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, the Wrens were another high-profile barnstorming team that they took their name from the Renaissance ballroom where they played. They would have dinner and drinks and the whole service. Then they'd clear the tables, set up basketball hoops, and they'd play a basketball game. And the Harlem Globetrotters were among those types of teams, traveling the country and getting some of the best, most talented players, black players, to barnstorm with them. And that contract negotiation went south. That's the first bit of luck that got Bill Russell to the Celtics. He was going to go play for the Harlem Globetrotters, and that negotiation didn't go well. And so he entered the draft. Now, in that draft, the 1956 draft, the Rochester Royals had the first overall pick. The St. Louis Hawks had the second overall pick. Well, the famous story, and if you don't know it, Walter Brown, the Celtics owner at the time, was one of the founders of the Ice Capades. Now, back then, 1956, the NBA wasn't exactly a big draw. So these owners who owned teams and owned these arenas needed to fill these arenas. They needed something to make money. So the Rochester Royals were struggling, And Walter Brown was, an influential person when it came to the Ice Capades, and the Ice Capades sold. They filled the arena. So Walter Brown cut a deal with the Royals owner and said, I will send you the Ice Capades if you don't select Bill Russell. This type of stuff happened back then. So the Royals said, yeah, we want the Ice Capades. I want money to fill the arena. I want the gate from the Ice Capades. Yes, we don't care. We'll take somebody else, no problem. The Hawks traded the second pick for Ed McCauley. Ed McCauley was on the Celtics, but he was from St. Louis. He wanted to go back to St. Louis to be with his family. I think he had a sick son. So he wanted to go back to St. Louis. So the Celtics said, okay, we'll trade McCauley to the Hawks and we'll take the number 2 pick. So after cutting the Ice Capades deal with the Royals, the Rochester Royals, by the way, are now the Sacramento Kings. And if you want a history of the Kings franchise making poor front office decisions, go all the way back to 1956 when they were bribed by the Celtics to not pick Bill Russell, instead take the Ice Capades. That, when you say something sets the tone for a franchise, there you go. Have they made a good roster decision since? No, I don't think so. So the Celtics get the number 2 pick. They take Bill Russell. They win a championship right away. The Hawks beat the Celtics the next year because Bill Russell sprained an ankle and couldn't move. And all of a sudden, Bob Pettit goes off, and I think Bill Russell was pretty salty about that to this day, till the end. And then what they did, they whipped off 8 straight championships. So Russell comes in and takes charge of a Celtics team that really, in those early days, the pre-Russell Celtics were, with Sharman and Kuzi, they had this reputation of shrinking in the moment. They were not clutch. They were great in the regular season, and they had a reputation for folding in the playoffs, kind of tailing away. Russell comes in, and all of a sudden, boom, that's a winner. I mean, he almost won 10 straight championships. So he wins 1, loses in the final, then wins 8 in a row, gets beat by Philly, and then wins 2 more as a player coach. The first black head coach in history. And the important thing to understand there about being a head coach at that time, no assistant coaches. So and player coaches are not allowed today. You literally cannot be a player coach. But let's just pretend that there was a special dispensation and Jayson Tatum becomes player coach, and he could have 5 assistants, 10 assistants, people in the back of the bench, people kind of being in charge of certain things. And as he ran down the floor, getting all the information from them, be like, okay, let's call a timeout. All of that stuff. Let's make this sub. Let's make that sub. Bill Russell did this all on his own. No assistant coaches. None of that. He was the man. 10 times a game 7. 10 times he was in a game 7. He never lost a single one. Now, Sam Jones was very huge in that, but also Bill Russell trusted Sam Jones to make those shots, and to go 10-0 in game 7s, that's incredible. So the one thing he didn't win was Rookie of the Year. Tommy Heinsohn won the Rookie of the Year because Bill was away for the Olympics and missed enough games where he didn't get enough. He didn't get the votes. But anyway, Bill Russell was a pioneer. A pioneer. The best Game 7 story was in 1969, his last season. They were playing the Lakers. And the Lakers had Game 7 at their house, at the Forum. Jack Kent Cooke owned the Lakers, and he put out flyers. And it said, when, not if, the Lakers win the title, balloons will be released from the rafters. The USC marching band will play Happy Days Are Here Again. And broadcaster Chick Hearn will interview Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, and Will Chamberlain in that order. So Bill Russell caught wind of those balloons up in the rafters. And he says to his team, those effing balloons are staying up there. Russell whipped himself into such a state of frenzy that he threw up before big games, all these big games. He got himself to a point where his stomach couldn't handle the nerves. And then once he got out there, things clicked. To go out there in 1969 in his final year and to beat the Lakers and to walk out a winner is the ultimate, like, you talk about intestinal fortitude. That's the ultimate. But all throughout this time, all throughout the all NBA selections, the five MVPs, five MVPs, all throughout all of that, every accolade you can think of, he was also dealing with the worst, most virulent, ugly, hateful racism that you could imagine. And we're sitting here worried about guys being run out of town because, oh, we heard our name in a trade rumor. Bill Russell had someone break into his house, vandalize his house, defecate on his bed, put it on the walls, and he still came out and played. He went through road trips where his black teammates weren't served at restaurants. And this was an exhibition. And he got everybody up and left. And he said, we're not playing. The black players left. He went through some of the worst stuff you can imagine. Again, born in the Deep South. Being a black athlete in the 60s it was just, you think about the Jackie Robinson story and all of the hate that he got. Any black athlete integrating a league in the 60s, that's some real hate. And for Russ to go out there on the floor and perform in front of people that he didn't know if any of the people in the stands were the people sending him those hateful messages or doing these hateful things. But every time something like that happened, he channeled it into winning. He turned that into you can't take this one thing away from me. You can try to take away my humanity. You can try to take away all of these things. You cannot take away my ability to win at every level, every situation. You cannot take that away from me. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, I can still win. That was basically his attitude. And it's amazing, amazing. That stuff would have broken lesser people. But there he was, standing next to other civil rights icons, marching with Martin Luther King, standing next to Muhammad Ali, that famous photo, sitting next to Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Lou Alcindor, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, fighting for equality, fighting for the things that, frankly, players are still fighting for today. And not being worried about what it would mean to his legacy, not worried about what it would mean to people back home. He had a very complicated relationship with the city of Boston, where he was he was the icon of the team, the guy. Without Bill Russell, none of that stuff, well, I shouldn't say none, but most of that stuff doesn't happen. A great amount of it doesn't happen. The entire course of league history changes. If Bill Russell had gone to the Harlem Globetrotters and didn't come to the NBA, maybe he joins in the middle of the 60s. Who knows? Who knows what happens? But if that was the way it went, who knows what the Celtics history would be? But through it all, in Boston, where he was winning and he felt respected by Red Auerbach, respected by his teammates, respected by the owner, he felt safe with his team. And then outside of basketball, who knows what he was facing? Or we do know some of what he was facing. He eventually he went away from Boston for a while. He eventually came back for the statue unveiling, and he's been in the building. He was there in the finals. I saw him across the court. It's kind of heartbreaking to say that the last Celtics basketball that Bill Russell watched was a loss in the finals. I mean, it would have been amazing to have won that. Now in retrospect, I don't know. If I sat there and said, it's partly my fault that we couldn't pull out this championship, and now Bill Russell's gone. Bill Russell sat here, and I played in front of Bill Russell, and we lost in front of Bill Russell, and now he's gone. I would take that very hard. I would take that very hard. Bill Russell is his legacy, the impact, immeasurable. Immeasurable. You can't even come close. He was just an incredible human being who, through the worst of the worst, rose above it and was an example of how to fight back. He was an example of how to take the slings and arrows and turn them into something different. It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to really put everything into words. Bill Russell, you can't write the history of the NBA, obviously, without Bill Russell. You can't write the history of the United States without Bill Russell. You can't. He was an integral figure in the civil rights movement. He used his power, his fame, to add weight to the movement. He broke barriers, becoming the first black head coach. broke barriers in the broadcasting booth. I mean, he became a household name. He rose above everything. How do you go from that 1956 draft and questions about who he was and all of everything that he went through to 11-time champion and getting into the broadcast booth and being in TV and like hosting Saturday Night Live, which back then, especially when you host Saturday Night Live, like you're now part of pop culture. You're a household name. He became a household name. He was a star. He just excelled at everything. You can't really capture Bill Russell's legacy. I certainly can't do it in this podcast. I can rattle off all his accomplishments. I can tell you some of the stories, but all I can do is add a voice to this tapestry of love for Bill Russell. The city owes him a lot. You wish certain things had gone differently over the course of his life, but he pushed this city forward. And you see current guys moved by this. And I want to see that legacy honored by continuing to push the city forward. I think it's the best way to honor Bill Russell. Continue to push for the things that he pushed for. There's this giant hole in the game of basketball now. It's a crater. It's never going to be filled. The loss of Bill Russell is too huge. He's one of those guys that will absolutely never be forgotten. History will always remember Bill Russell. I met Bill Russell once and I made a total ass out of myself. This was many years ago, probably at this point, 20, 25 years ago or so. So it was pre 9/11 and, airports were a little more wide open. And I was at Logan. I was traveling. I was on a basketball team that was traveling to a tournament. And I see Bill Russell across the terminal. And I was like, oh no, it's Bill Russell. I got to go say something. So I sprint across the terminal. And by the time I get to him, I must have been running flat out. I couldn't breathe. I just breathlessly was like, oh, Mr. Russell, you're the greatest. I'm the biggest fan. And just completely just discombobulated. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And at that point, I looked like I was crazy. And he said, thank you. He was very kind and gracious and walked on. And that's my only interaction with Bill Russell. And as moronic as that was, I'm so glad that I had that. I've been in the building with Bill Russell. You saw him across that floor sitting there. And I was nervous. Just in the finals. I'm up in the media section and he's way diagonally across on the opposite side on the baseline. And I'm nervous because Bill Russell's in the building thinking like, oh my God, what if I bump into him again? What if I, that's the impact that it's just, he was such a giant, such a giant. I don't know what else to say. I want to keep talking about him, but also I don't. It sucks. This is a terrible day. It was a terrible day. What else can I say? We love you, Bill. We always will. Thank you so much for everything that you did for the game of basketball, for all the lives that you touched, for everything that you were, every time you rose above things that most people would crumble under. Just an amazing, amazing example of a human being. And just endlessly thank you.